9:30, I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with the agenda? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the minutes from the September 20th, 2023 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we have 3 timed items this morning, 2 minor variances, sitting as committee of adjustment, and then a zone change. And that's it, and they all start right now at 9:30. Moved by Mitchell and seconded by Finch that council approve, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that council meeting be adjourned at 9:31 a.m. for the purposes of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And so the first minor variance is application A08-23 submitted by Ross Acre Limited pertaining to lands described as, etc. I'll turn it over to you, Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning to council, staff, members of the public joining us here today. The first application before the committee this morning, A08-23, affects lands owned by Terry Ross, or Ross Acre Limited. And in this particular instance, the applicant is applying to retain 2 dwellings on the property. Just to highlight for the committee, whether viewed as an ARU or a second dwelling for farm help, essentially 6 of one, half dozen the other when it comes to this particular application. Generally speaking, in reviewing ARU applications, since they're relatively new, the key determining factor as to whether or not we process them as an ARU or a second dwelling has to do with the size of the dwelling itself. So at 2,000 square feet, which is the case with this, makes more sense to process it as a second dwelling rather than an ARU, especially given that they have over 150 acres of farmland. At this point in time, I just want to highlight that the farm itself does not contain any livestock, so as you'll notice through the report, the justification for permitting a second dwelling for on-farm help really isn't satisfied in this particular case, nor are the criteria that would apply to an ARU. Staff are not supportive of the application here today. I am available to take any questions that council or the committee in this case may have on the application, and I do notice the applicant is not here to speak to it, so hopefully I'm able to address anything that the committee might have.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from the committee for the planner? Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, Spencer, just one question, and I just want to clarify my understanding of the report that staff is not supporting that they keep the original building because of the reasons that you just mentioned. It doesn't qualify as an ARU or for the labor component of the legislation. But if they were to demolish this building, they would then be eligible to build an ARU as long as it was 1,500 square feet or smaller, or they could put in a garden suite. Are those 2 options available to them?
Through the mayor, that's correct. So they would be able to apply for an ARU, 1,506 square feet, or 50% of the gross floor area of the now existing dwelling, whichever the lesser, and subject to the other ARU criteria. And a garden suite would also be an option. In this case, it's not abundantly clear on plate 2, given that the new dwelling was just constructed. They completed construction last year. So I just highlight for the committee that both dwellings do currently exist on the property, and this is a result of the applicant had actually paid the deposit for demolition of the existing structure, and now family circumstances have changed, and it warrants them to make this request to ask for keeping both dwellings on the property. The applicant, in meeting with him, he did discuss that this might not be a permanent solution, but for at least the immediately foreseeable future, it makes most sense for the family for them to retain both dwellings on the property.
Any other questions for the planner from the committee? Not seeing any then. As the applicant here, and do they wish to speak to their application? If you can just step over to the delegations table, Spencer, and make sure the microphone's on.
Oh, I'm not gonna be that long, trust me.
Say that now, but.
Oh, no. No. Is it on? Can you hear me good? Okay. Thank you. I'm Terry Ross. Own Ross Acres, whatever, and I'll just explain kind of what the process was here. Is that I don't think the application kind of says it all, if that's fair. So the house that exists there, yes, we just moved into the new house on, I would say, about September the 15th. So we've only been in it for a couple weeks. The old house that's there, it says the farming operation. Well, we have like 100,000 chickens, so we do need people work. That house, for the whole family dynamics of it, my mom is 82 and in a house down the road at another place that my son would like to move into, but she's not ready to go to a home. So this actually, in the whole scheme of things, our plan is only like a 3 to 4 years of leaving the old house there. That would be maximum. I 100% guarantee that, because we don't want to live, or we don't want our family living that close together anyways. That will just create more problems than it'll ever fix. So it just seemed like a too nice of a house to demo, but 100% our intentions were to knock it down, because it's not going to stay there forever. I don't know if we could do something for a 3 to 4 year plan. That would probably be what we truly should be asking for, not a 20 or a second dwelling permanent. No way. That makes no sense to us as a family either. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and whatever it is what it is, because yeah, thank you for your time.
Just before you go anywhere, Terry, any questions from the committee for the applicant? You're good, thanks. Are there any members of the public in person or online here to speak to this application? Not seeing any. Then I have here, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve application file A08-23 submitted by Ross Acre Farms for lands described as West Parts Lot 35 and 36, Concession 7, in the Township of Zorra, municipally known as 437-136 43rd line, as it relates to 1. Relief from the provisions of section 7.2.4, number of accessory dwellings and garden suites per lot to permit a second single detached dwelling on a farm. Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I support that we approve this application for a lot of reasons. First of all, I don't agree with the policy that government should just decide how much labor is required to operate a farm. And when it relates to housing, we don't do that for any other industry, and I don't think we should do it for agriculture. But beyond that, the more practical items that we look at when we're determining the merits of an application are that there is no loss of agricultural land. Both buildings are in the original footprint. There's been no objection from any township or county staff or from any neighbors. As was just noted in the early discussions, it doesn't qualify for an ARU because the original building is 2,000 feet, which is, or 2,000 square feet, which is not a mansion. It's only about 500 feet bigger than the limit for an ARU. Both houses share the same entrance and driveway. There's adequate water and wastewater. And as was just confirmed by the planner, if the original house were demolished, the applicants could then turn around and apply to put in a ARU, which is a smaller permanent house, or they could put in a garden suite, which is now eligible to be there for up to 20 years. To me, that makes no sense financially, environmentally, or actually ethically, to require a livable house to be torn down and then say it's okay to turn around and do one of two other alternatives. As far as precedents, council has set precedents for second permanent dwellings in the past, and I realize that this council is not bound by decisions of previous councils, but I think residents deserve the expectation of some consistency of what they're allowed to do when circumstances are very similar. And I think at any time requiring this house to be torn down, but especially when we're looking at a housing shortage, that it just does not make, it's just not right to require a livable house to be demolished for the only reason that it doesn't meet a couple of standards as far as ARU and labor requirement. So that's why I'm very strongly in support of the application.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
So while I agree with pretty much everything Councillor Mitchell is saying, I do have an amendment that I would like to move in relation to supporting of this application, but potentially with some added pieces to it. So can we read that so then I can speak to it?
So I have here just passed to me, moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, and that the approval only pertains to the structures that are shown on Plate 2 in Report A08-23. Deputy Mayor Grigg, as the mover of the amendment, do you wish to speak to the amendment only at this point?
Yes. So the amendment is to recognize support for this particular the broader story of what's happening here, and retaining the structure for all of the reasons that were just mentioned before, but that in the future, when there is a demolition, that the intention of the support is to retain the existing structure and provide housing while it's still there. But that upon demolition of that structure, that we would not then be approving to have a second oversized dwelling permitted on that property. And so at the time of demolition, and I understand the applicant is saying that they have no interest of doing that, but I think for thorough decision-making of the committee, as well as clear indication to the broader community or to any future landholders of this property, that the future application would go back through the planning process, and to recognize my support is for retention of that property that's pre-existing, and not support for the scale of the secondary dwelling being as oversized as what it is.
Councillor Stewart, as the seconder of the amendment, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yeah, just to say that I think we need to look at each of these situations as they come up individually, and I think, we are in full support of, or I'm in full support of both, but I'm speaking to the amendment right now, just to clarify that it is the house that's in place right now, and that anything in the future, that sounds like it's in line with what the landowners' hopes are for this motion, so.
Anybody else on the amendment? Councillor Mitchell.
I support the amendment as well. Anytime you have these applications, the more clarity you can have on what this actually applies to and what impact it has on this property and other properties in the future. It's better to have that in writing. So I think it's a good addition to the original motion.
Anyone else on the amendment? I'm going to read the amendment again and call the question. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, and that the approval only pertains to the structures that are shown on Plate 2 in Report A08-23. Any further discussion? Oh, Spencer.
Sorry, just one minor thing that I caught quickly. Because the air photo shown on Plate 2 is 2020 imagery, it actually doesn't show the house that was erected last year. So I would just suggest to the committee that they instead refer to Plate 3, because Plate 3 is the applicant's sketch, which shows the next one down. That actually identifies the new dwelling, the existing dwelling, etc. So just a minor modification, sort of put you through that again.
So if I just change this to a 3, is anybody going to complain to the Integrity Commissioner on there? 3. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, and that, you all owe me one. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, and that the approval only pertains to the structures that are shown on Plate 3 in Report A08-23. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So now the motion that is in front of council now is that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve application file A08-23 submitted by Ross Acre Farms for lands described as West Parts Lots 35 and 36, Concession 7 in the Township of Zorra, municipally known as 437-136 43rd line, as it relates to 1. Relief from the provisions of Section 7.2.4, number of accessory dwellings and garden suites per lot, to permit a second single detached dwelling on a farm, and that the approval only pertains to the structures that are shown on Plate 3 in Report A08-23. Is there any discussion? Yeah, this one is a little bit problematic for me for the reasons outlined in the report. And especially that, you know, there was a plan, you know, the permit to build was based on the permit to demolish, and I'm not a, you know, personally, I'm not a big believer that there's that many exceptions to our policies that we like to think that there are, but this is absolutely one, and mostly for the reasons that Councillor Mitchell outlined. I think this is against our policies, but that's why we have councils, is to identify the cases where there is an exception, and I think for that reason, I'm going to be voting in support of this. So, anybody else before I call the question? Do you want me to read it again? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So, I guess there's nothing to wait or proceed with because it's built, and you just don't accidentally knock it down, Terry. Okay. Well, I'm not going to comment on your family living close together situation. Next item then, Spencer, is minor variance application AO9-23 submitted by Calvin Klingenberg and Katie Gilmar pertaining to lands described as. I'll turn it over to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the application before the committee at this time, the applicant, in this case, Calvin Klingenberg and Kate Gilmar, have applied to essentially facilitate an addition onto an existing accessory structure. The accessory structure is shown on plate 2 of the report, as well as the general idea of the proposed addition. And in this case, it would be a cumulative size of about 1,700 square feet, just over the 1,000 square feet which is currently permitted. I would highlight the main highlight from this particular report is, while the property is zoned R1, it is significantly larger than 95% of R1 properties. So in that, we do view these accessory structures relative to the size of the lot, the surrounding area, etc. You can see Thames Springs subdivision to the immediate south. In this case, the lot is basically the same size as all of those lots immediately south of it put together. So in this instance, it is warranted that the addition to the accessory structure to allow a 1,700 square foot building is appropriate. There were no comments or concerns as a result of circulation. We did, however, just yesterday receive a comment from a neighbor just supporting the application. Just want to make the committee aware of that. We are supportive of the application here today. I don't believe the applicant is here, but I'm happy to speak to any questions if the committee has any.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from the committee for the planner on the report? Not seeing any, and the applicant is not here in person or online, Maggie. Are there any members of the public, either here or online, to speak to this application? All right, then. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve application AO9-23 submitted by Calvin Klingenberg and Katie Gilmar for lands described as Concession 1 South Part Lot 20, municipally known as 154931 15th Line, Banner Road, Thamesford, in the Township of Zorra as it relates to 1. Relief from Section 5.1, Table 5.1.1.3, Regulations for Accessory Uses, I. To increase the maximum permitted gross floor area of an accessory structure from 100 square meters, 1,076 square feet, to 158 square meters, 1,700 square feet, to facilitate the construction of a structure accessory to a residential use on a property zoned residential type 1 zone, R1, in the Township of Zorra. Councillor Finch is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that? Councillor Mitchell is the seconder.
Very briefly, and I agree with what Spencer said, that the difference on this one is that this is an almost 2-acre lot in location. It's and the addition is relatively minor, and that's why I agree with approving this. That if it was a regular sized lot, I wouldn't. But this is different, even though it is part of Thamesford. It's an older, very large lot, so it makes sense to allow this.
Anyone else? All is in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Spencer, I assume you'll be getting in touch with them, or somebody from building will, or whatever. Thank you. And then, again, zone change application ZN5-23-09 submitted by Eric and Lisa DeBoer. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The application for zone change before council is an application to, in this instance, permit a garden suite, a temporary garden suite. I would highlight for council that the provisions surrounding garden suites, it changed some time ago in the Planning Act to allow for a period of up to 20 years. As part of our work in the planning department to introduce ARU provisions and policies, so too did we update the provisions and policies surrounding garden suites, in this case to become consistent with the Planning Act. So we moved from a 10-year period to up to a 20-year period. That is reflected in this report. In this particular instance, the owners of the property, Eric and Lisa DeBoer, are applying for the garden suite for an immediate family member. It's undetermined whether they themselves will occupy it or a child of theirs will occupy it. Nevertheless, both are appropriate and acceptable for allowing a garden suite. The other piece I would highlight for this RE lot, just under 2 acres in size, they are requesting a new driveway. That has gone through the consultation process internally. We've consulted with Township Public Works as well as Fire Department. There's no issue with allowing that second driveway. There's a permit requirement there. However, it's not been identified as being problematic from either Township Public Works or the Fire Department. We are supportive of the application here today and are recommending that council approve it for a period of 20 years rather than the previous 10 years, which was consistent with other garden suite applications. The owners are available to answer any questions, as well as I'm happy to do the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from the committee for the planner on the report? Not seeing any. Does the applicant wish to speak to their application? It's entirely up to you if you want to speak to it or not. Okay. And are there any members of the public here or online that wish to speak to the application? No. Okay, so just so you understand what's going to happen, we're going to come out of the planning meeting now because it's a procedural matter how to deal with your zone change application. That doesn't mean that we haven't decided on it. We're going to decide on it when we come out of the planning meeting. I just don't want you to panic when we don't decide on this. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that pursuant to the Planning Act, the public meeting be adjourned at 9:52 a.m. and the regular meeting of council be called back to order. Is any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I have moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve in principle the zone change application submitted by Eric and Lisa DeBoer, whereby the lands described as Part Lot 20, Concession 7, West Zorra, Township of Zorra, are to be rezoned from residential existing lot zone RE to special residential existing lot zone RE special to permit a garden suite for a temporary time period of 20 years from October 24th, 2023 to October 24th, 2043. Councillor Finch is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that? Councillor Mitchell is the seconder. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, basically all we're doing is changing this from residential existing to special residential existing so that under the regulations they're allowed to put up a garden suite, and then this addresses sort of what I was talking about earlier. It's all part of finding places for people to live, and whether the DeBoers have issues with the family on the same property doesn't appear to be a problem at this point, so I support the application. It's all part of the finding housing wherever we can find it.
Anybody else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So that is approved. Follow up with Spencer and or building. I don't know who that's going to be because there's a time period, and then you'll be good to go. Thanks. And next up then is reports from staff. 8.1, well, I guess first of all, I've gotten out of the habit of doing this. Anybody have to go anywhere or be anywhere before I just go in order? We haven't really done that in a long time, but 8.1 Fire Department, Report 2023-098 from the Fire Chief regarding emergency management updates. Chief, is there anything you want to highlight for council?
Good morning. I would like to recognize all the work that Maggie did on this report and kept it moving forward. It's a big report, and it's been a long time coming to do some updates, and without Maggie's efforts and keeping it moving forward, it wouldn't have gotten done in the manner it did. So a huge thank you to Maggie.
questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Yes, Chief, reading through this whole document kind of took me back about a dozen years when I was doing my emergency management training. So there was only one thing that I was unclear about, and that was on page 12 of the plan. And there was a line near the bottom of the page that begins with the words "for coordination," and it has to do with our coordination with the county emergency plan. So can you just clarify what role, how that works if the emergency expands beyond our border, or we need county resources to deal with within our borders?
So the plan is in place so that we've got a list of resources that we can access, and ultimately, when it's chaos, we have something to go to. If it expands beyond our borders, we can't ask or the county to declare a state of emergency, but we can access their resources and access their plan. It's designed in a way that often if we're in an emergency here, something weather related, it might not be isolated to Zorra, having just come through the pandemic, recognizing those things. So it's not a coordination that they would declare an emergency or that we could ask that of them, but that we could ask to work with their plan and the resources within it to work as a county rather than just in a silo.
Thank you. Any other questions on the report? So further to the chief's comments about thanking Maggie for the work on the report, and I would echo those. I also think we should point out to residents, this is the kind of work that staff do all the time behind the scenes that, you know, council didn't explicitly ask for. Hopefully, we never ever have to use. But it's important to know. It reminds me a little bit of the external third-party audit that we have, right? That nobody pays attention to, right? But we really should. And this is another one of those, right? Nobody pays attention to it, but it's really important that we know that we have this in place, right? I remember in March of 2020 having these phone call discussions about, you know, what are we doing? Do we declare a state of emergency or not? And it was because of reports like this that we had the basis for making those decisions as to what does this mean. But you absolutely do not use it at all until all of a sudden one day you're like pouring through the thing every day, right? So vitally important work, and I just think it's important to point out that this is the kind of stuff that municipal staff are doing all the time that residents just don't see happening, but it's there when we need it, and we've used it. So we used it by not declaring, but nevertheless, the documents we used. So moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that council approve the recommended updates to the emergency response plan and approve bylaw 47-23. Does anybody wish to speak to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And report 2023-115 from the fire chief regarding monthly departmental activities. Chief, is there anything you want to highlight for council in there?
Chelmsford Station's pumper did sell, and it is en route to Winnipeg. I suspect it's probably there. It left Monday, was picked up, and they were doing a road trip out. Fire Prevention Week is next week. We are having open houses at each of the stations in alignment with our recruitment. But our firefighters are also visiting all 3 schools within the township next week and doing activities with the K-3 children. We just came through Test Your Smoke Alarm Day, first one of the province on September 28th, and a huge campaign province-wide. Zorra got creative, and all the firefighters at each station were able to participate in partnership with some of our local businesses, and we had the trucks out in the community. And then it was also campaigned at the farm show that we participated in last month. A couple neat things. Chelmsford's new truck, 5101, their brand new E1 pumper was featured in Canadian Firefighter as part of the Camp Molly. Photos were submitted and they were featured there as one of the runner-ups in the contest for the photos in 2023. And our pump ops is wrapping up, so 10 senior firefighters completed their pump ops outside of RIFSOC. They elected to do it on training nights and had some success, so they're just gearing up to bring testing in. I also want to recognize our firefighters for going into a really busy month. I think it's important that we recognize that a lot of our firefighters are in the fields this month, doing things with their families back to school, and we're layering on recruitment and Fire Safety Week and Saved by the Beep, and hiring, and it's just chaos for them. So I want to make sure that they're recognized, and if we see them out in the community, to thank them for all the time that they're giving up to get through some of this stuff.
Thanks, Chief. Questions from council on the report? Councilor Mitchell.
How much did we get for the old fire truck, and was that kind of within expectations?
I think the expectations were shaken up when we received so much for Uniondale's truck, but we received $30,000. It went back on Gov Deals in a transparent manner, and it's a beautiful truck, and it's going to make a community in probably northern Winnipeg, either an Indigenous community or a mining community. It'll have a second life there. But yeah, $30,000. And
That's the problem Uniondale's always had, that we set such a high standard. So
Hashtag parochialism. Any other questions for the chief on the report? Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2023-115 from the fire chief be received and filed for information purposes only, and that Uniondale sets a high standard. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, chief. And 8.2 Recreation Department. And just before I go to Michelle for the report, want to introduce Ali Thompson back there to any members of council who have not met Ali. Started yesterday was your first day, right? Yesterday was your first day. I know from talking to Ali yesterday and to Michelle and senior management team, they're very excited about her starting here. We know that there's like a bunch of changes going on in recreation right now. I think council has high hopes for recreation and the type of service that we want delivered. And I think that's exactly what Ali's here for, is for that kind of work. So, so welcome. Thank you for coming to Zorra to work, and also for coming to the meeting today. Hopefully you get a little bit of an insight into watching council today as to what the atmosphere here is like. We set a pretty high standard for the service that we want to deliver to residents, but I think we're pretty reasonable council here, and if that's not true, then your fellow staff members will correct me. So thank you. And then report 2023-123 from the interim director of recreation and facilities regarding monthly departmental activities. Michelle, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
Yes, good morning, everyone. We did get a question about when the partition work will be conducted, and that's going to be taking place on October the 10th. So next Tuesday, that should be completed.
Questions from council? Not seeing any. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that report 2023-123 from the interim director of recreation and facilities be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, Michelle. And Ali. And 8.3, Building and Drainage Department, report 2023-119 from the chief building official drainage superintendent regarding realignment of federal drain due to Woodstock Quarry expansion. Nicole, is there anything you want to highlight for council in that before I ask them for questions?
No.
Questions from council on the report? I have 17. No, I'm just joking. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that council adopt the drainage petition submitted by Lafarge Canada Incorporated under Section 4 of the Drainage Act, RSO 1990, relating to property located at part lots 2 to 4, concession 3 and 4 in the Township of Zorra for realignment of the federal drain, and that council pass a resolution to appoint K-Smart Associates Limited as the engineering firm to review and prepare a report for lands within the federal drain. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And report 2023-120 from the chief building official drainage superintendent regarding monthly departmental activities. Nicole, is there anything you want to highlight in that one for council?
No.
Questions from council on the report? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2023-120 from the chief building official drainage superintendent be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Who is it? It's done anyway. 8.4, Public Works Department. Memorandum 2023-125 from the Director of Public Works regarding monthly departmental activities. Steve, is there anything you want to highlight for council?
Nothing really to highlight, just an update on the ZMF geothermal system. It's moving along very well. We're making progress. The staff there on site are working late hours to keep this moving. So we're seeing some good progress, more so in the last 2 weeks than we've seen in the last year, so it's good to see. Even though it doesn't look all that great from the out front, they have the front system is all connected to the building now. Fusing was completed last night of all the tubes. They need to pressure test and pre-fill all the tubes with water. That's happening today and tomorrow. Once that passes the tests, will be starting to fill that whole system with the antifreeze, the glycols. So then we move forward, start with the setting up the pumps. As of yesterday, their initial startup of the heat pumps is to be on Friday, October 5th. Balancing of the system will be next week, and the controls setups will be also next week. And the rooftop unit is scheduled to do a start up on the 16th of October. That's the final step, and we should be up and completely done by then, so commissioned by then.
Questions from council on the report and or the verbal update? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that report 2023-125 from the Director of Public Works be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And memorandum 2023-126 from the Director of Public Works regarding Bridge Culvert 0260 replacement costs. Steve, is there anything you want to highlight in that report?
No, nothing to highlight or update at this point.
Questions from council on this report? Well, I would have lost that bet. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council authorize the transfer from reserves from the infrastructure levy reserve in the amount of $474,602 for 2023, and that the 2024 budget transfer back to the infrastructure reserve in the amount of $474,602. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, so this report in front of us today is really a follow-up to previous discussions, figuring out what's going on with this bridge, the bad news of the work that needs to happen, and then the affiliated costs with it. So in this follow-up, we're discussing how to fund it. So I think, what staff are presenting here is really the only way forward with this, and unfortunately means shuffling some projects around, but because this project was up for full replacement within the 10 years, we will be back on track within a reasonable time frame. I think, we've been having some discussions around asset management funding and different funding structures or building of reserves, or sort of starting to put some money away to recognize that when we're getting into especially this bridge work, that sometimes these surprises come up, and we do have significant aging bridge infrastructure in the municipality. So while today's decision is just in relation to the funding for this particular project, I think I will be looking forward to broader budgetary discussions at the time of budget to start recognizing some consistent and responsible funding structures moving forward, not just for this project, but for all projects.
Councillor Stewart is the seconder. Do you wish to speak to him? Anyone else? Councillor Finch.
Looking over this report and having conversations with Steve, I think that the CCBF is not enough funding coming down from our upper tier governments, and I feel that I am looking forward to budget time with all of this, but we also have a lot of bridges in Zorra Township that are coming due, and we can't be doing this every other year, where we have nothing happening the next year. So I think we need to look a little further into other funding.
Anyone else? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council authorize the transfer of firm reserves from the infrastructure levy reserve in the amount of $474,602 for 2023, and that the 2024 budget transfer back to the infrastructure reserve in the amount of $474,602. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And thanks, Steve. Finance Department, 8.5, a memorandum 2023-124 from the Director of Finance regarding the 2024 budget survey results. Diane, is there anything you want to highlight for council in there?
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Questions from council? Nope. Okay, Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Accidental synchronicity between Councillor Mitchell and Greg. So not a question, but I mean it's great to see these reports where we're able to get some feedback from the community. This can help guide us in some of our ideas about where we should be allocating funding, and we can combine this information with what we understand in the seats that we sit in about how things operate and what our responsibilities are, which is not necessarily, familiar knowledge within the community, but it's the responsibility for us to have that knowledge sitting in these seats. The one thing that I did want to highlight from this survey as a thank you to the structure and authoring of this survey is the information of sectioning out, when you're talking about more or less of a service, the sectioning out of on a property assessed at $250,000. This is what that annual contribution is to each department, and enabled not only for us but for the public to see that for that hypothetical property, spending $21 on general government, $108 on Parks and Rec, $85 on fire, $76 on police, $606 on roads and bridges, and $2 on bylaw enforcement, and $472 on capital expenditures. It really provides some good context, I think, when we're talking about, we want more, like, what's bylaw doing or not doing or whatever, that there's a recognition that that's 2% of what our investment is. And when we're having conversations around how we're funding bridges and roads, we have an idea of what the cost is for us to have that infrastructure. So not a question, but just sort of a comment that we are often looking at numbers and categories, but sectioning it out where someone can think about, if this were my property or this is relatively similar to the majority of our properties, what is that split in the costing between the different departments?
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, and comments as well, and I echo what Deputy Mayor just said. That was in my notes, the breakdown of how much we spend. That gives residents a good idea of where the money's going to. But what really caught my attention was question number 5, which was the chart on page 140 of the agenda. And in all except for one category, the maintained group outweighed both the increased and decreased categories when those were combined, which to me means that we're not making everybody happy, but we're getting that happy medium. Whenever you've got more people that think you should be doing more, or when you've got more people thinking what you're doing is about right, as opposed to the people that think you should be doing more and the people that think you should be doing less, because you're always going to have people on the polar opposite. So I think overall we're in that, maybe not happy medium, but we're in the middle there of what we're trying to achieve. But I did notice that there was three categories where the reduced outweighed was greater than the enhanced, and those were general government, and that's understandable. Everybody hates government. They don't know what we do. We waste too much money, and that's been a long-standing position of a lot of people. Bylaw enforcement, there again, that was very close, so not really worth commenting on a whole lot. But capital expenditures, was the one where 35 respondents thought we should be spending less on capital expenditures, which is interesting because of the two of the three categories where there was a significant number of responses to increase, parks and recreation and roads and bridges. If we're going to increase, we have to have more capital expenditures. So the results of the poll are at odds. You can't cut capital expenditures at the same time as you're improving things that need capital expenditures. The other one where there was a lot of respondents wanted it enhanced was policing. And that's understandable, whether it's people just don't feel safe anymore, and whether that's a perception or a reality, we could debate that all day, but I think it's understandable that people want to have more presence of policing to deal with issues that are going on in society right now. The one thing, and I realize this is a county-wide thing or survey, but the one thing if there's a change to it, what I would like to see in future surveys is that there'd be a breakdown into where respondents live, because I think it's where they live relates to what their expectations, and this is what this survey to me is all about. Are their expectations being met? Are they getting what they want for the tax dollars that they're paying? And to me, the two of the ones are where there was enhancement, they wanted enhancement, were parks and recreation, which to me is a urban issue, and roads is more of a rural issue. So if we, in a future survey, could break it down into, do you live in a serviced village, Thamesford or Embro? Do you live in an unserviced village, Lakeside, Harrington, and all the other unserviced village? Or do you live in a rural? And I think that would give us a better idea of where their priorities are, because the potential here is that you could have some kind of a campaign and everybody that lives on a gravel road says, we want more road, money spent on road. Or conversely, you could have a campaign in Embro and Thamesford that we want more parks, which would skew the information coming to us. So I don't know if that's possible, but I would like to see, I know there was one little chart there about postal codes, but really didn't tell us anything. So that's my input. But overall, I think we're not making everybody happy, but we're making more people happy than unhappy. It's just that we hear from the people that we're not making happy. So that's my comments.
Any other questions? Questions or comments? Okay. I have one question. When can we get a report from OPP on, activity, whatever, quarterly, annually, whatever, on activities here, and then on an ongoing basis going forward? That was one of the issues in here was about policing, and I'm just wondering when could we work towards that?
We can request that from the detachment commander.
Excellent. Any other questions before I read the motion? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that report 2023-124 and the 2024 budget survey responses be received and filed for information purposes only. Anybody wish to speak to that? Councillor Finch.
I just wanted to say, with it being 288% that contributed to the survey, that's wonderful, but I feel like as a township and a county we could do better, because we do hear from so many residents that they don't have a way to reach out and talk to us, even though we are here, email, phone call. So I would love to see that better, but I just wanted to comment on how the age range of the ones that were commenting was wonderful. And I'd like to add that I love the top 5 affordable housing is in there.
Anyone else? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I just thought I was going to make similar comments to Katie and Paul earlier on there, but that in some of the answers, and I appreciated reading some of the feedback, it's hard to get some context sometimes. It's hard to get context as a councillor into what the people you're representing intend by some of the comments, as well, it'd be a better opportunity to inform them if you had a direct conversation. So, message that I want to pass along is that contact us. If you wrote something in the survey that you feel really passionate about and you want it to change, get in touch with us and explain where you're coming from.
And of course, I would add for any residents watching this to your comments that all of our contact info is on the website, freely available to people to contact us by email or phone if they want to have those kinds of, more in-depth or nuanced conversations about actually changing something. Councillor Mitchell.
And just to build on what Kevin just said, in the comments, there was a whole list of things that people wanted done, like at a grocery store and that sort of thing, that we have really very little, if any, influence on. So I think there's a misunderstanding among a lot of people of we can't do everything. We have limited amount of legislative power and financial power and there was quite a few comments there, stuff that, yeah, we'd like to see it happen, but there's not a whole lot we can do about it.
Anyone else? A couple comments from me. First of all, one thing is I thought it was interesting. I mean, it is only 163 responses over the entire, almost 9,000 residents. But more than half of the people who actually, chose to respond have lived in Zorra for less than 20 years. That's, that's a really massively disproportionate response compared to how long most of our 9,000 residents have lived here, right? So in other words, our most recent residents are, in some respects, certainly in the context of this survey, our most engaged residents, telling us what they do and do not want for their community and reaching out and telling us that. I think that's really, I'm not sure what to do with that yet, but it's an interesting observation. I think it is anyway. But I think also when I look at some of the priorities that people ask for here, notwithstanding what decisions council's going to make in 2024 budget and on, and our strategic plan when we finalize that, but it looks really good to me when I look at that, there's specific comments about looking for trails, and trails is in our Recreation, Arts and Culture Master Plan, and has been in every budget since then, and I would expect will be in our 2024 budget. Housing, as mentioned, frankly, Zorra Township's done more than, just about any other, on a percentage basis, of just about any other municipality that I'm aware of, especially with respect to the Maple Leaf property. The decision we recently made on affordable housing project in Embro, on a percentage basis, we're off the charts. The highest density approved by any municipality in all of Oxford County in the last 5 years is in Zorra Township. So with respect to housing, I think we can, say we need to keep going, but I think we're doing well. With respect to recreation, again, the Recreation, Arts and Culture Master Plan is going to be refreshed in the coming year, and hopefully will reflect some of this input, or certainly be another opportunity for these people to put their input into that. And with respect to infrastructure, we just had a great report earlier today and discussion about how we're going to continue to fund our infrastructure, primarily roads and bridges and culverts. So again, notwithstanding what they think of the specific decisions that we make on these issues, when I look at the top issues that residents have highlighted for us here, I think that we're having the appropriate discussions about how to advance them. So I think, I guess the pressure is then on the five of us to actually make the right decisions when we reach those decision points. But I think there's action happening on these already, and we're going in the right direction. So I think that would be a good response to these residents. But I would certainly agree with Councillor Stewart that, for some of these issues that they raise to actually change, is going to require more than a single sentence comment in a survey, and they should reach out to us. So anybody else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And again, Finance Department Memorandum 2023-121 from the Director of Finance regarding the elimination of the vacant unit rebate program. Diana, is there anything you want to highlight for council on that?
No, nothing at this time.
Questions from council? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2023-121 be received as information, and that bylaw 48-23, a bylaw to opt out of the vacant unit rebate program, be approved. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 8.6, Corporate Services Department, report 2023-116 from the Bylaw Enforcement Officer regarding departmental updates. Dave, is there anything you want to highlight in that report for council before I ask them for questions?
Good morning. No, I have nothing to add to the report.
Questions from council on the report? Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, Dave, there's a couple categories in the chart that I wasn't clear what. One is landing clear. What does that involve?
Land and clear, it's one of our bylaws, and basically that'll speak to different properties as far as excessive grass, garbage on people's lawns, that type of thing. It also speaks to dumping on township properties, that kind of stuff. There's a whole pile of issues, but basically it's a maintenance issue bylaw.
Okay, and the other one was roads, and it said it includes garbage dumping and mud on the road and that sort of thing. Is it garbage dumping the major part of that one, or is it?
The roads is actually would be people who track excess of gravel, dirt on the roads, basically altering, or causing a safety issue with the roads, that type of thing. So it's different from land and clear with people dumping garbage on the road. This is actually tracking dirt, say from a construction site or something like that, onto the roads.
And that's more liable in the fall and harvest with farmers.
I find it in the summertime more with the construction sites in Thamesford, that type of thing. With the construction sites, the companies there, I've had to speak to a few of them there and remind them of their obligation. If you're working on a construction site, it's still your obligation. When you track dirt onto the road at the end of the night, they just have to be reminded to clean the road when they're done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Dave.
Any other questions on the report? So then, moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that report 2023-116 from the bylaw enforcement officer be received and filed for information purposes. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried, but you're not done, Dave. In case council is not aware, I have in my hand a letter from the Municipal Law Enforcement Officers Association of Ontario, and in my other hand, I have a beautiful medal. Yeah, it's pretty fancy, right? Really blingy. Congratulating Dave Robertson, bylaw enforcement officer, was awarded the Ontario Municipal Law Enforcement Long Service Medal for 30 years of service. And happy to have you here doing that now. I think you should take the lack of questions on your report as confidence in the work that you're doing, not as a lack of interest in the work that you're doing. And I want to congratulate you on this, in addition to this letter. And again, thank you for doing that work here in Zorra Township for our residents and looking after the bylaws that, again, this council passes, but we're not going out measuring the height of fences or looking for track out on the road. You are. And thank you for doing that for us as members of council and for our residents, so that their bylaws are respected and enforced for them. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I think we'll take a break, say we'll come back in here at 10:45. 10:46, a minute late. I call the meeting back to order, and we are at correspondence requiring direction, which there's none. So boards and committees, Upper Thames River Conservation Authority update from board member Mitchell. Paul.
September meeting of the Upper Thames Board was last Tuesday, September 26. We started out with a couple of policy updates. One was an inclusion that the Upper Thames adopts the policy, quote, that a free-flowing river offers the healthiest environmental condition, and that where weirs and dams no longer serve a valid purpose, the Upper Thames supports and encourages decommissioning, unquote. So that impacts Zorra. We have two potential decommissioned dams at Embro and Harrington, but this actually just codifies into policy that that's the position of the Upper Thames as far as removing dams and other and returning waterways to their natural. The other one was that staff, Upper Thames staff develop a policy to manage encampments on Upper Thames property. And there's been a lot of publicity, especially in London, about encampments of homeless people beside the Thames River. But apparently other municipalities, Woodstock and Ingersoll specifically, do have issues with people setting up camps on Upper Thames property. There's obviously liability issues and also interference with enjoyment of the general public of these properties because of having homeless people living there. We learned about the new Upper Thames strategic plan. The plan is to have that in place within 6 months, and I'll point out that there's an estimated $25,000 expense for consultant fees to work on this plan as opposed to our strategic plan where we're doing it all in-house. A report on increases to forestry service fees beginning in 2024. There are some significant increases to those fees, but that's to come closer to full cost recovery of the forestry program, and also to cover the increased costs of trees and labor to do planting. But it was pointed out that there are a number of programs where residents can apply to federal and provincial programs as far as the tree planting initiatives, where they can get back, whether they would pay out the money to the Upper Thames, but they would be able to recoup some of their expenses through these programs. We had an update on the cost apportionment agreements with municipalities, and apparently most of those are in the final stages. The deadline is that they be all signed by January 1st, 2024. Conservation authorities have been asking the ministry for an extension of 3 months, and the question was asked, is the response been from the ministry that they will grant those extensions, and if the extensions aren't granted and the agreements aren't signed by the deadline, what's the impact? And the answer to both questions was the ministry isn't saying, which is kind of typical. We had follow-up to budget discussions and response to board questions to the initial budget work that was presented the month before. And one question was, there was 10 additional full-time positions being budgeted for. And the question was, are those temporary to involve the transition phase of the new legislation, or they're permanent? And apparently they will be permanent. And the final thing was the former Children's Safety Village, which is in Fanshop Conservation Area. It had been run for the last 20 years by the Safety Village Board, which disbanded at the first of this year, and the land that they had been renting from the Upper Thames reverted back to the Upper Thames use, and we took control of that property at the start of the year. There were 70 bicycles on hand, which were donated to a local charity that repairs and hands out bicycles to people that within the community that could make good use of them. And there were 44 mini electric Jeeps that they used for the training that were donated to other safety villages throughout Ontario. So all the vehicles that were used to train the kids have now been gone on to better places. 25 of the 32 mini buildings that are on site are scheduled for to be demolished. They have just not been maintained over the last year. So once that's all done, we are using the main building there for various functions, and it will be used for yet to determined functions by the Upper Thames. So that was the September meeting.
Any questions for Councilor Mitchell on the report? I have one. I didn't capture it in the resolution that you said that the board passed with respect to waterways and returning to their natural course. But I guess my question is, was that with respect to properties that Upper Thames owns, or all waterways that the Upper Thames has regulation or commenting authority on?
I would have to double check the exact wording, but I would think it only applies to Upper Thames properties where there's a potential removal of some type of impediment. And it's been the policy for I don't know how long for Upper Thames staff that it's better to return it to natural unless there's a real reason to keep it. This just codifies it that this is this is the policy. So.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that item 10A be received and filed for information purposes only. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 11, information items. So I have here a motion to receive and file A through D. Does anybody want to do anything other than that with any of A, B, C, or D? Is there any questions for anyone on A, B, C, or D? Councilor Mitchell.
Just brief comments on B about the housing. And I actually went on and read the task force recommendations. There's 55 of them on there. Some of them don't apply to Zorra, like reducing required parking spaces for buildings near transportation hubs, and some things I don't agree with, and I think based on our discussions as a council, we don't agree with some of the recommendations. But were a number of things in there that permitting ARUs and garden suites, full spectrum of supply and intensification, speeding up site plans and building permit approvals, adopt e-permitting systems. Those are all things that Zorra has been ahead of, and we're actually doing. So, and I won't go into length because I've made this point before. There are things that government can do to facilitate building of housing, but ultimately, when politicians say we're going to get 1.5 million built in X number of years, or we're going to get 3.5 million built in X number of years, the market is going to dictate. And when we start our monthly report on permits that have been issued in Zorra Township this year compared to last year and the year before, they're way down. And that's not because anything we've done, it's because the market is dictating that these houses aren't being built for a whole host of reasons, including higher interest rates, labor shortages, material problems, that sort of thing. Ultimately, the market will decide, no matter how many political task force and recommendations are made.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
I don't want to overlap. So this letter is for, Marcus, this is for you to fill out, like you submit as an individual. It's not through a resolution of council. It is a request from the head of council to identify the 5.
Yeah, and thank you for asking that. To clarify, the minister sent the letter to heads of council and then sent a follow-up letter clarifying that he did not require council resolutions to give the 5, that he just wanted to hear from the heads of council. As I always do whenever I receive correspondence from a minister as head of council, I ask staff to put it on the agenda, and then it's up to the 5 of us what we want to do with that, if anything. So it's on here. So it's in your hands what to do. I I do have to respond to it. There's a veiled threat in the letter that there could be financial consequences for municipalities whose head of council does not respond. So I'm going to respond. No surprise, I have opinions on what the top 5 would be, so happy to share them. But yeah, it's on the agenda and it's in council's hands what council wants to do with it.
So I think Councillor Mitchell made some excellent points there in relation to the recommendations of the task force, the things that are not relevant to us, the things that we're already doing. And I think we've had so many discussions around this horseshoe and obviously at the county level in terms of what the obstacles are. And so I don't have any further comment that I would like for you to hear ahead of you completing this form. I think this is a great opportunity for us to have any additional discussion ahead of you doing this. Obviously, you're doing it as an individual, so you don't have to take our comments into account, but we've had, I think, some great consensus around this table on this heavily important topic, and I'm happy to hear that you will be doing your due diligence in completing this form and getting it submitted.
Anyone else on any of these? Councillor Mitchell.
And I think that falls in line with the whole strong mayor things, that they only want to hear from the mayors. They're not really concerned what councils have to say.
But I am, so it's on the agenda, because to be clear, if the 4 of you said, here's what we think your top 5 are, if I disagreed with you, I'd be happy to debate that. But yeah, to be clear, I think it should be in a position that's taken by the Township of Zorra, and that's the 5 of us, not just me. So, any further discussion? Moved by Stuart, seconded by Greg, that items 11A through D be received and filed for information purposes only. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And no unfinished business, no notices of motion, bylaws. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that bylaws 47-23, 48-23, and 49-23 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And calendar. So what I'm seeing here is I'm on behalf of the township and the county, I'm going to Toronto tomorrow night to represent both at Taiwan's National Day reception. That's their equivalent of Taiwan's equivalent of Canada Day, basically, in Toronto. And then Thanksgiving on Monday. And Chalmers Church Bazaar on Saturday the 14th. I think it's 10 till 2 o'clock. That was the place where I first bought a bag of Contour coffee in a WestJet airsick bag in the basement of Chalmers Church, whatever number of years ago that was now. And Safe and Well Oxford meeting, I point that out because while nobody here other than myself is on that steering committee, it is, while rebranded as Safe and Well Oxford, it is our Township of Zorra Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. That's at 10 o'clock at the Oxford County Administration Building on the 16th. And then I think we're back here on the 18th. I think that's all that I have in the calendar. Did I miss anything? Chief.
Open house tonight at Uniondale Station, next Tuesday the 10th at Tempsford, and the 11th at Embro. They've asked for open houses at each of their respective stations this year.
Can you email all of council those dates or teams or whatever, just so
Yep.
we, thank you.
And you're welcome to stop in and be present. Hopefully we'll have some new recruits coming to ask some questions and pick up applications.
Good. Anybody else? Councillor Mitchell.
To follow up on that, Uniondale firefighters recently donated a defibrillator to the Browns Community Center at the former school, and tonight they return with the Wisdom Wednesday at 7:30, and firefighters will be there to explain how to use it. And the other event is a HACA meeting next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. That'll be October the 10th.
Okay. And Deputy Mayor Green?
On Tuesday, we have, on Tuesday the 10th, there's a ZMCC meeting that will be held here in council chambers because the Beatty Room has a booking. And then we also have a Beachville District Museum board meeting on Wednesday, the 11th. The ZMCC, the Zorra Multi-Use Courts Committee, is hosting a pickleball event. Oh, the ZMCC meeting is the 17th. Thank you. I had that in incorrectly then. I would have been here. Prematurely, 17th. Okay, so there's a multi-use courts fundraiser event. It's a pickleball tournament happening at the TDRC on Saturday the 14th. It's a Halloween pickleball tournament. Costumes are not required, but there's a prize for best costume. What is that prize? We're still figuring it out. You can, there was a couple of registration sessions held in person by the committee. Those have since closed, but we still have, I think, 6 spots remaining. So if you are interested in playing pickleball, the Lions Club will have the canteen open for food and the bar will be open. Contact a member of the committee and we can still get you registered. And if you're not interested in playing, but you're interested in deep fried pickles, a cold beverage, and watching your community members participate in Canada's fastest growing recreational whatever, come on down. There will be lots of chairs set up so you can come and watch and enjoy some pickleball.
And what time was that at on this 14th?
Doors open at 6:30.
Okay.
The fierce competition will begin at 7. We anticipate finals around 10:30. Yeah.
Anything else, Councillor Finch?
It's not Zorra Township, but it is Oxford County. Punky Doodles Corners is having an information meeting tomorrow night in Tavistock. Camp Tanner is having a community discussion at Knox United Church on October 13th at 7:30. And the Ambrose Zorra Agricultural Society is having a strategic planning meeting on October 19th at Knox United at 7:30.
Anything else? All right. So I think then confirmatory and we're done. So moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that bylaw 50-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held October 4th, 2023 be read a first, second, and third time this October 4th, 2023. And further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, excuse me, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 11:04 a.m. And the next meeting of council be called for the October 18th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers of the Township Municipal Office. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?